come all the way to North Lincolnshire to meet Hannah Dale.
We're here in North Lincolnshire, just between Brigg and Caister, and our farm is about 300 acres and it is in the Ancone Valley, and it would have been once part of a vast complex of wetlands and marshes, but it has been drained extensively over the past few hundred years to create more farmland. But unfortunately for us, despite all of that drainage, it's still pretty much terrible to farm. So it sits really wet all winter. It's grade 3 unproductive soils, it's heavy clay. And then in the summer, it just bakes hard. And the minute there are cracks in the soil so deep you can put your hand in. So we did try to farm it more conventionally for a couple of years. We just found that it didn't make any money. It was very, very stressful. Weather was never right. And so about 7 or 8 years ago, we decided to look at different options. And my background's in zoology. And my husband, Jeff, and I have always been passionate about wildlife and conservation. We've been reading about the rewilding movement. And we decided to just try something a little bit different, really, with our land. And so 2019 was the last harvest that we took from this farm. And since then, we've just kind of stood back and waited to see what would happen, really. And it's been really remarkable how quickly nature has returned. And that's kind of what I've written about in the book, really. Some of the challenges that we faced, the experiences that we've had over the course of a year of, I guess, rewilding, but also some of the positives, lots of the species that have returned to the farm, some of the new characters that we've seen. And my day job is a wildlife illustrator, so how that's inspired me as an artist. And yeah.
How did the book come about?
I suppose in my other life, I'm a wildlife illustrator and I have a giftware business that we set up about 13 or 14 years ago now. So I've been working with a publisher on that side of things, really, for over a decade. And they had asked me about, have you got any ideas for a new book? And actually I thought, I've got a different story to tell about what we're doing here. And I think there's an important message that I want to communicate, and I can do that all through the writing and through the artwork as well. So that's sort of where the idea came from. And, I was very lucky to already be working with a brilliant publisher who've been really supportive and have kind of come along with me on that journey.
I mean, certainly as a piece of art in its own right, the book is absolutely beautiful. And these are all your own illustrations.
All of the artwork was inspired by experiences, I suppose, that I've had on the farm. And what's been really nice actually about the book is that there are lots of finished pieces in there that have been inspired by what we've seen, but it's also a sketchbook extract. So you get a real sense of how the artwork originates, I suppose, from the actual experience of being on the farm, interacting with wildlife, through how that's recorded in a sketchbook to then how it ends up being as a finished piece. So it tells a slightly different story as well that I think you don't see really at all on the business side of things. Normally you just see the finished piece, but I think it's been really nice to be able to share, I suppose, the authenticity really of where the artwork comes from and how it's inspired, and that process of creating it, as well as more of the ecological side of things, of actually the practical things that we've done and what we've experienced on the farm. So it's quite a nice balance really of that artistic side and also the ecological conservation side.
Yeah. I think it's one thing for people to be excited enough to want to hear about your rewilding story, because that clearly is exciting. But surely better still for them to take a piece of it away with them and read about it later as well.
I hope so. I think, I'd like to think so. I've had really good feedback on this and people have enjoyed it. So, yeah.
So let's talk about some of the highlights of the rewilding. I know it's a lot of hard work being a farmer, let alone a rewilding farmer. But what are some of the highlights of what you've achieved?
We've been monitoring as best we can since we started doing this. And I think that's been really important to, have that evidence to show what we're doing is making a difference. And it has really demonstrated how quickly nature has started to recover. One thing that's been quite interesting on the butterflies, so before we started rewilding, we were recording about 13 or 14 different species of butterfly on the farm and around the lanes. And last year we recorded 24 species of butterfly and greater numbers of abundance as well of those individual species. So, that's been a very rapid change. And the ecologist who came and did the butterfly survey actually commented that it's probably one of the best sites in Lincolnshire now for grassland butterflies.
Wow.
So we've gone from being one of the worst sites for arable farming in the county to one of the best sites for grassland butterflies. And I think for me, that is evidence that what we're doing is right for the land.
And did you need to do something tangible and deliberate for that, or it was a matter of just letting nature get on with it?
That was literally just let nature get on with it. We haven't really done anything. And one of the most profound experiences I think that I've had personally over the past 7 or 8 years was we were walking in about this time of year, I think maybe a little bit later into the summer, but past a patch of quite dense thistles, and this cloud of meadow brown butterflies. I think about 1,500 butterflies just lifted from this patch of thistles. It was just incredible, real abundance. And that we've talked about shifting baseline syndrome, and we kind of get excited when we see a few commas and a peacock on a buddleia in the garden, and we've forgotten that we should be seeing these clouds of butterflies, and it was just astonishing, really. So that's been really incredible. I think the other highlight for me is our farm backs onto a village, and we're hearing from the community that they're seeing more wildlife in their garden. And I'm often getting messages from people who are walking down the lane alongside our farm where we've allowed the hedgerows to grow out, and that, full of nesting birds. They're hearing more bird song as they're walking along the lane. There've been more house martins nesting in their village than there have been for many years. And, I'm sure that is likely to be because of there's more insects for them to feed on now in the farm. There's no insecticides, no pesticides being sprayed on the land. So I think that's very encouraging and very positive as well, that other people are starting to see the benefits of what we're doing here.
And talking of birds, what is the situation? You said there's lots more butterflies, lots more birds as well?
Yeah. So I think we've doubled the number of species of birds that are using the farm. I think we recorded 96 species of bird on the farm in the past 12 months, and 50 species breeding across about 460 nest sites. So, and what's really exciting actually this year, we have got quite a lot of ground nesting birds. So we had 40 skylark territories, but as the farm starts to scrub up and we're starting to see sallow and the hedgerow plants that are starting to move into the farm, obviously many of the nesting sites were within the hedgerows. And actually this year we started to see willow warblers setting up their territories in the scrub that started to emerge and at the edge of new woodlands that are appearing. So we're almost turning the farm into a giant hedgerow, basically. So we're hopefully over the next few years we'll start to see those number of nesting sites really increase at an exponential rate. And that's just started to happen this year, which is really exciting.
Yes, it's a bit counterintuitive, isn't there? Lots of birds prefer scrubland and brambles that predators can't get into, but it doesn't look cute from the outside.
I think that is a matter of opinion, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think for me, and what I would really hope to convey with what we're doing is to change people's attitude really in what looks pretty and what looks nice. And this idea that scrub is not attractive and that we should be clearing it actually is wrong. And it is beautiful.
Exactly.
The roses are in flower, the hawthorn. I mean, what is more beautiful than a flowering hawthorn? It's, and even things like thistles, I would say probably one of the biggest challenges that we had certainly in the first couple of years, was that, as you'd expect, pioneer plants started to dominate the land. It had been enriched with fertilizers and they thrive in that nitrogen-rich soil. So we did have a lot of thistles. And people got very upset about it. Well, 1 or 2 people got very upset about it. Most people didn't really care. And this idea that, oh my God, well, that's it. You got thistles everywhere. You're never going to have anything else. And it was full of wildlife. The thistles, huge flocks of goldfinch feeding on the seeds in the winter, and each plant was just full of insects. But very, very quickly that succession has moved on. The nitrogen starts to be depleted in the soil, that it can't support as many thistles. And one area in particular which was very, very dense with thistle, there's barely any now, and that's 2 or 3 years later. So the succession and the changing nature of the land actually is happening, and it's really interesting and exciting to see that.
What's the story with small mammals?
So we haven't actually done any sort of surveys of small mammals, but I guess what we are seeing are more kestrels, more barn owls. We've had short-eared owls overwintering on farm. So I guess the evidence that they're doing better and than they would have done when we were cultivating the land is being seen in the sky, really, by the predators that are hunting them.
Yeah. And I believe you put in a pair of beavers.
We have. So we have the first pair of beavers in Lincolnshire for 400 years. Currently still the only beavers in Lincolnshire. We're hoping that they'll breed this year. So if they have bred, it's likely that we should start to see evidence of their kits in July. So we're sort of waiting with bated breath. But really the reason for that is that, I mentioned that where we are, really, it should be wetland. And so a big part of our ambition is to restore more natural hydrology to the farm. So we refer to it often as post-industrial wilding, because it really is an industrial landscape that we started with. It's intensively drained. All of the water that flows into the farm comes through the wolds, and it's actually chalk stream country. One of the boundary dikes is actually registered as a chalk stream, which is so degraded it's been moved and canalised, and it's basically just a silted up dike now. But the water coming into the farm through the springs, and it is actually really beautiful quality water. And at the minute it just goes straight into the land drains and is diverted into two straight canalised dikes. And so what we're trying to do is to restore that hydrology to a more natural situation, flow the water over the land rather than under it. And the beavers, we're hoping, are going to be a big part of that. So they're ecosystem engineers. They're already damming across the dikes and starting to change the landscape. And as the wetland area wets up and starts to grow more willow and things like that, we're hoping that the beavers will move in and start excavating channels and damming water, streams and rivulets that are coming through the farm, and really start to change it. So it's part of a long-term plan, really, to restore that natural hydrology.
You're something of a pioneer when it comes to giving up farming and rewilding it, although you're not totally alone. Is there a growing community of farm landowners wishing to do these kind of things?
I think absolutely. I think certainly even over the last 8 years, really, we've seen a big change. And, it seems hard to believe now, but really 8 years ago when we first started thinking about this, rewilding really wasn't part of the common vernacular. People weren't talking about it. You were sort of introducing it, saying, well, have you heard of rewilding? Now everybody's heard of it. And what is really exciting is we're getting now other landowners coming to us and saying, oh, and actually I've had one that had read my book, which was amazing, because to think that my book's inspired somebody to think a little bit differently about land use. But they're coming to us and saying, well, we've got areas of our farm that they're not productive. It's not really working well, farming it in a conventional way. Can we come and see what you're doing and, have a look and, tentatively sort of thinking like, is this something that we could think about? And they come here and they're so inspired by what they've seen and the changes that we've seen. We've got orchids growing now where, and that really is an indicator that the soil health is starting to improve, and they're going away and thinking about different ways that they could manage their land. So I think there absolutely is a growing community, and I think there's a real grassroots movement, not just in landowners as well, and people that want to see nature restored. They want to see wildlife back in their gardens, and can remember when we had a more, even in our own lifetimes, when wildlife was more abundant, and they can see that it's in trouble. So there's definitely a growing community of people that are interested and excited about it and inspired. It's an exciting time, I think.
I mean, you're right. And with absence of leadership around the world, with environmental responsibility sort of on the back burner, if on any burner, it's down to people like yourself to lead the way, I think, isn't it?
We could have waited, we'll wait to see whether we can get some grant funding to do this, or we can wait to do this. And we've just sort of thought, no, let's just get on with it. Well, we wait forever otherwise. And things just don't seem to be changing quickly enough, really, from that legislative point of view. And so we just, yeah.
What are you looking forward to for a summer season?
Well, the dragonflies and the butterflies really just starting to appear. And the dragonflies and damselflies have been another really great success story. So one of the first things that we did was to dig a series of ponds. And it was interesting. As soon as we started to excavate them, you were straight into it's a seam of kimmeridge clay that underpins the whole farm. And really that explains the nature of the soil. And as soon as we started digging these ponds, you were straight into this thick blue clay. And what it meant is that the ponds hold water beautifully. So we built them or dug them in with the kind of best practice for creating wildlife ponds. So we did a series of shallow ponds with long shallow banks. And we didn't connect it up to any kind of watercolours. We just allowed them to fill by rainwater and groundwater, and we didn't populate them with anything. And they looked like pretty unpromising dirty holes in the ground when we first did them. And within a very short space of time, they're just teeming with life. They're full of a wide variety of invertebrates. The plant communities have really started to diversify. Some of them have got sticklebacks in. We dragged some branches out to the side of one of the ponds just to try and increase the complexity a little bit. And within a couple of days of doing that, kingfishers were using the branches as a perch to catch the stickleback.
Wow.
And they've been full of, well, they are currently full of tadpoles that are just growing legs and starting to emerge. And the dragonflies and damselflies have just been amazing. So last year we recorded 19 species of dragonfly and damselfly. So on a series of new ponds, it's really amazing. So I'm looking forward to that. And it's really nice when you walk through the field where the ponds are. It's kind of, we're trying to manage that more like a traditional meadow because of its history. And you walk through it and the dragonflies just kind of like, it's like spray almost. Every time we put a foot down, they come coming out, and then the crickets and the grasshoppers start to sing, and it's just quite magical, really.
Do you have plans to open it up for visitors or not yet?
So I do get asked often if people can come and have a look round, and I try to accommodate it if at all possible. I don't think that we'd ever have it as completely open to the public. So I think my priority is for the nature of the wildlife, and I think if you have too much disturbance, it can be detrimental. But if I can use it to educate and to inspire other people, and also to provide access to nature for people that don't otherwise have access to nature, and that's where I would like to be, really. I think maybe working with community groups or schools, and we're doing a lot of that already. I think it's just, I'm trying to do it alongside a full-time job and 3 children, and it's really just my husband and I managing it all. So it's a bit of a challenge, but I do try to say where I can.
Well, now the rain has gone over, maybe we can go have a little look around.
So this pond was dug about 25 years ago, at the same time as about 10 acres of plantation woodland were put in. And then it was pretty much abandoned, and up to the point where the beavers arrived, it was in fairly poor condition, actually. That it was full of reed mace, there was very little open water, it was really overgrown with willow, and it was dropping its leaves in and silting it up, and it wasn't particularly nice. And actually the beavers over the past 18 months or so have really improved the health of the pond. They've removed a lot of the reed mace, and they've coppiced the willow around the outside, and you can see here where they've coppiced this willow here, and it hasn't quite severed the trunk, and the willow's healed itself and then sent out all of this vigorous growth, and the beavers really like to feed on these tender stems, so they're kind of farming it basically. The beavers have also, you can see these piles of clay around the outside of the pond. They've excavated, I think, deeper channels within the pond and pulled this clay out, so they've really changed the landscape quite significantly. And as a result of that, we've had amphibians laying spawn in here for the first time since we've been here anyway, and greater number of dragonflies and damselflies around the pond as well. So through their activities, even just here, they've improved the health of this pond. So this is an area where the beavers have obviously been very active. We think there's a lodge just the other side of the this hedgerow in a thicket of blackthorn, so it's very difficult to see. But then they've been coming through the winter into here and coppicing trees. So they tend to only do this in the winter. At the moment, there's lots of fresh green vegetation around the ponds, and so they don't really need to take the trees down in this way. But throughout the winter, they've been taking these oak down, and bit by bit, the tree just disappears, and they're eating. They look for the kind of sugar layer underneath the bark, and then they use it for building material in the lodge and the dam. So one of the most visible changes is where we're seeing a huge amount of natural regeneration. So 5 years ago, this was just completely barren, bare soil. And as you can see, we've got sallow, birch, hawthorn, roses, and lots of different scrub species that are starting to appear. Some of the birch are now 15, 20 foot. Lots of oak saplings that have started to grow as well. So it's really changing the character of the landscape. So this is one of the bioacoustic monitors got set up across the farm. And so last summer we had them for 6 months over the summer period recording bats. And we were able to identify 9 different bat species on the farm. We're kind of viewing that as a baseline, really. So as the wetland develops and insect numbers increase, we'd hope that the abundance and variety of bats that we're able to host on the farm increases.
So, Hannah, a wilding year, where's it available apart from at the book fair when you talk in
It's
July?
widely available in bookstores around the country, bookshop.org, who support independent bookshops.
Yeah.
It's available in Waterstones and it is available on Amazon.
Literally. Hannah, thank you so much. It's
Thank
been a
you.
delight hearing your story. I look forward to hearing more successes as time goes on.
Thank you very much.